My lords, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome once again to Transport Fever 2. This is episode 12 of our small map series. Now, a couple of things before we get started. First of all, this is going to be a post-production voiceover commentary because I forgot to press the record button on the microphone prior to setting up, so all of this was recorded without any commentary or narration, so we're going to have to approach it from a different angle. So if it's a little bit off in terms of my commentary not perhaps syncing up with what's happening, or I'm, catching up with myself as to what I was doing on screen, then you'll have to bear with me. Hopefully this won't happen again, but I thought it's better to do this than to waste the footage, because we did get quite a lot done in this episode and the next one. What I'd also like to do is just point out and thank you all, because we've just passed over 1,000 subscribers, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it means so much. It really does. I feel privileged, honoured, humbled, all of the above, and I just want to thank you all for your support, your views, your likes, your comments, your subscriptions. It really is fantastic. So thank you very much indeed. Now, I did say we'd do something once we hit that 1,000 subscriber mark. I have a few things in mind, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Not in this episode or the next one, but perhaps it'll be number 14 by the time we get around to it, due to my recording schedule. But yes, we will do something to celebrate, and we'll pick that up in a future episode, basically. But there will be something to commemorate and to celebrate hitting that milestone. Okay, so we've just brought up the user interface there. We're in 1925, and of course we unlocked the Flying Scotsman last time around. We have around about 50 million in the bank, so we're doing pretty well on that front. Should be enough for what I know it's going to be enough, because this is a post-production commentary. Going to be enough for what we want to do. As you can see here, just showing off that we now have the modern light signals, and I've gone ahead and created a little gantry here over this station at Long Eaton. This is a freight station, and put some of the overhead signals in place. Now, I'm not sure if these are the correct signals that I'm using. As you can tell, my voice is not quite matching up to what's happening on the screen. I recorded this a couple of hours ago, you see, so trying to remember exactly what came next is a little difficult, so you'll have to bear with me. But I do remember I was talking about whether I've used the correct style signals in the correct situational position, if you know what I mean, because there are so many different types of signals available with the mod that I just don't know if I'm using the correct one in the correct circumstances. So we can see here we have a couple with the gantries for maintenance access and the likes, and there are some standalone signals that don't have the gantries. And we also switch between 2-aspect, 3-aspect and 4-aspect signals. And if I'm using them in the wrong locations, perhaps some are meant for junctions, some are meant for stations, some are meant for trunk lines, some are meant for, spur lines, I don't know. But yeah, I have gone through and upgraded them all, and here we can see a couple of the standalone signals without the gantries on them. And again, they are 4-aspect. Don't know whether they should be 4-aspect or 2 or 3, but what the heck. I've tried to give it a bit of a mix and match between the various styles of signals, just so it isn't all much of a muchness when it comes to our signals on a cab ride. I've also done a few dwarf signals in some of the tunnels as well, not too many, but I've sprinkled a few here and there, and again, that's just to keep it mixed up, when we're going on a cab ride. We're not looking at the same signal 100 times over on a journey. We do see different types from time to time. Right, so today then, if you remember, we unlocked the, what do we call it now, the Flying Scotsman, wasn't it? And again, you can have to just ignore the cursor here, because what I'm doing is not matching up to what I'm saying, and I do apologise for that. Clearly at the minute I'm talking about how many cargo types we have available or on demand in Long Eaton. We have 5. We are satisfying 4 of them. We're getting the fuel and tools in at a good lick, as well as the bricks and the food. So basically Long Eaton has kind of become our unofficial capital city on this map due to its size. And what we're going to do, we're going to start in Long Eaton, and we're going to run a passenger line out to Hearn Bay, which is obviously a much smaller city. We've not done anything with it at all. We've not given it any transport links, nor have we provided any of the commodities that it requires. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to start our passenger main line, Here's all the signals that come with the mod, the various types, as we can see. You can see the standalone ones, the gantries, and the dwarf signals as well. So yeah, let's pick our station, shall we? And obviously we're going to use this UK modded station. I was just looking at these metro signs here, thinking that was a station. It's not, it is just the signage. So we're going to use this station here, and there are quite a lot of tweaks you can do with this station. You can change the trim colour of the buildings, and we're going to go for blue here. You can change the building size, so you can have a small building or a large building. Obviously for our capital city, such as it is, we are going to have a large building size, so we do eventually go for size number 3. That gives it a more imposing and prestigious look and feel, and that's what you want in your capital city. We'll go for the long canopy length on our platforms as well, just so our people stay nice and dry. And we have unlocked high-speed tracks as well, as you can see in the options there. So we are going to make that jump and switch to high-speed tracks, especially for our passenger lines, because we want them to have as high a speed as possible. And it also means that once we start unlocking the 75 mile per hour plus trains, our network can handle it, and we are future-proofed, and we're ready for those locomotives as soon as we unlock them. So let's go ahead and increase the amount of tracks and platforms we have. We're going to go for 3. We're going to have a main line that touches into all of the cities. And what we're also going to do is have some more local lines. We don't have many towns, so we're not going to have like a star style layout, but we might have like a little commuter line that runs to Long Eaton. In the future, what we might also do is go for a more of an express line all the way up to Axbridge that bypasses Long Eaton, so we'd want that to have a dedicated platform as well. Hence why we're going to go for a few platforms straight off the bat. Okay, so let's get on and build this station. We're going to keep it out of town as much as we can, just to cut down on the noise pollution that the trains generate, which will annoy our residents in Long Eaton and cause them to move out, which we certainly don't want to see happen. And you can see our residents there where they're based, so we've tried to keep it away from them, and we have a bit of dead space over here. Now I do have a plan for all of this, and that'll become evident later on down the line. It's not something we're going to tackle in the next few episodes, but I'd like to create maybe like a freight yard, a sidings if you will, in that area where we'll have a few depots and the likes. But enough about that. What we want to do now is put down our road connection. Given this is our capital city, we are going to, as you can see, go for the higher capacity road, and we're going to chuck on some bus lanes on this one as well. So let's lay that road there, although it doesn't look the best first time of asking. So what we're going to do is just flatten off the terrain around the station and then relay the road. So here we are, just flattening off some of the terrain here so we can get a nice smooth link between the road and the station entrance, and it looks nice and tidy. And if we can see here, look, that looks a lot better than previous. We don't have that step away, which was a little bit ugly on the first attempt that we had. So now we're just going to link this into the road network in Long Eaton. And we're just going to give simple connections here, nothing too fancy or extravagant. Just link it all together. That way we can get our buses down here a little bit later on, and they can get in and out of the station quite nicely. So there we go. We now also have traffic lights, as we can see. I'm not going to remove them today, but in the future we might want to look at removing some of those traffic lights because they can negatively impact your traffic, which might be counterintuitive, but yeah, we'll come back to that a little bit later. For now we want to get a bus station put down. We're going to have a 30-meter station for this, make it nice and long, and we want it just nestled in against the road there, and try and get it central to the train station building, which I think we've managed to do there. We're going to put in the second access point, of course, so we can get in and out of the bus station without any trouble. and it's called the Long Eaton Transfer, and we're going to retain that name because I think it's quite a fitting name for what it is, basically. Now, as you can see here, this road generation is giving us some traffic lights, so we are going to remove those in a few moments' time because we really don't need those traffic lights. They are absolutely superfluous to what we need. We shouldn't have much traffic down here aside from our buses anyway. So let's just go in now, open the street traffic layer, and just get rid of those traffic lights because we don't need them. They're just going to slow us down unnecessarily. Okay, so now we can plan where we want our tracks to run. And what we end up doing is we come level with our freight line. We then cross over. We have to cross over the oil freight line as well, just to the right. Our main line, we actually bridge over this in a few moments' time, as you'll see. And our commuter line that we're setting up, which is not going to have or see any traffic on it in this episode, but we put it in place so it's ready for us. Yeah, and then that just crosses straight over. We head down to the riverside on Hearn Bay, and just there, where I was indicating, is where we're going to put our station. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring our tracks out nice and flat to begin with, like this. We're going to bring the commuter line to run parallel with our main line. There we go. So we now have a nice stretch. Well, it's not a stretch. We have a little bit of triple track here. Okay, and what we're going to do now is just going to curve these tracks up towards our freight line. This commuter line here on the outside, we are going to keep that single tracked for now. We might put a few passing loops in when we set up the line that's going to run on it. But for now, we're just going to keep it single tracked. We're not going to double track everything as I ordinarily would. So I'm trying to play a little bit differently here, just to mix it up a bit, just to do something a little bit different and just see how it looks. Okay, so for our main line, because I want this train to use platform number 1, I'm putting in a simple crossover junction. So then our trains which are travelling on the left, so they're going to be on the middle of the 3 tracks as they come in. They can take this new crossover, and then they're going to be using platform 1. Now that means they can't use platform 2 because they have no way to get over to the left hand side when they're departing Long Eaton. So for now, track 2 or platform 2 is going to do, well, not a lot, but platform 1 is going to see quite a bit of use. So now it's time to actually build our train line, and we're going to curve it out. Now, as you can see, we're at 70 miles per hour on this corner. Now, there's no two ways about it. This is going to have to be quite a slow corner here, just because where the freight line is situated, we don't have a whole lot of space for us to work with. I think in the end, what we opt to do is have a slower corner, but a shorter corner, so we pay our speed penalty, if you will, earlier, and it gives us more space for the trains to run up and get back to top speed sooner rather than later. So that's what I'm doing here. We've reduced it from a 70 mile an hour curve to a 50 mile per hour curve, and we've got about a 3% slope there, which is fine. We're going slow anyway. So let's just bring all 3 of these tracks out now, and then what we're going to do, we're going to continue this corner, and hopefully we can pick up speed a lot sooner than we would have done with the 70 mile an hour corner. Although now that I look back at this, we can see where the 70 mile an hour curve actually ended. It was round about where we're at this point in time, and we're still 10 miles an hour off where we would have been. So I think I made a mistake doing this. I've accidentally caused our trains to run slower than they absolutely have to do. But what the heck, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, they're going to be coming into a stop at the station anyway, so really they would be slowing down at this point on approach. So that's fine. I can live with that mistake. It's not too much of a worry. I'm not overly concerned about getting maximum efficiency out of every single line anyway. It's just more about building the lines and making it look nice, although I suppose that is subjective. So yeah, we can see we're up at 62 miles an hour on this outer radius, which is going to be the commuter line eventually. As I said, we don't do anything with it in this episode, but we do set it up so it's ready to go. And now it's a case of getting these lines to come parallel with our freight line. And as we can see, we are quite elevated compared to the freight line. But if we keep it at a fixed slope, that does bring us much more level with the freight line. And if we pick the right node here, it would be so much more useful. That's better. But as you can see, I do struggle to get this to snap parallel for some reason. We do get it in the end, but we have to walk it down there essentially. So do it in shorter increments like that, and then another short increment. Although no, we get it. That's fine that time. And I think this one does it first time. Yes, I'm not sure what the middle track was playing silly buggers at, but there we go. So now we're in a position where we can snap parallel to the freight line, and we can get a decent speed on this corner here. As you can see, I'm at about 100 miles an hour on the outer radius. That does, of course, mean the inner two are going to be ever so slightly slower. I think we drop down to 99 and then 98. Oh, we should keep 99. I misremember, but never mind. Yeah, it's still a little bit slower, but 99 miles an hour, it's good enough, isn't it? It's not too bad. But we do notice at this point we have an unnecessary wiggle in this line that we really don't need. See the way it kinks out to the left there and then bends back in again? That's just unnecessary. So we end up deleting some of this track here and relaying it just to keep it nice and straight. There we go. That looks a lot better than our initial effort, and I think we've also picked up speed on that corner as well. I think at that point, the initial point, we were still at 60 on our original curve, but now up to, I think it was 118. So that's been a worthwhile change, and it just makes it look a lot nicer and smoother as well. So now we're parallel. What we need to do is think about tackling how we're going to cross over. And what we end up doing is our commuter line goes over at a separate point just to mix it up. As I said, we have to cross over the oil line there, and we do end up doing a bridge at that point, although as I was at this point in recording I didn't realise that, but it's something we end up doing, so a little spoiler alert there if you will. So this is where I've made the decision now to bring the commuter line, or the slower service, or what will be the slower service, over the freight line at a different point, just to make it look a little bit different and to mix it up somewhat. So we're just going to cross this straight over. Now, I'm not too concerned about the speed on this one, because we're going to be running slower trains down here anyway, and we really want to encourage the main line to be the faster line. So what we do is, we first of all do it like this, but then I get a brainwave, and what we opt to do instead is run a stretch of track on the right hand side of the freight line as we're currently looking at it, and then snap straight over from the left to the right, and you'll see what I mean here. So we put down a little stretch of track there, that's where the commuter line is going to run, and then we just bring it straight over and snap in, and we get about 60 miles an hour on this, which is not too bad. Certainly going to do a job for us. I think the lowest speed there we dropped to was 58. And then rather than having that hook directly parallel, we are going to stretch it out a bit to maintain a decent speed, but we are going to snap it parallel to the freight line, as we can see. And there we go. So now we're straddling the freight line really. We have the commuter already on the outside of the freight line. Meanwhile, our main line still sits on the inside. So we'll just leave that there for a moment, and then we'll come back and return to this main line, as it will be eventually. And now we need to think about getting this one over the freight line as well. And in the end, we do something very similar to what we did with the commuter service, or the slower service, and we put a stretch of track snapped parallel, or snapped into the freight line, and then just drag the main line straight over the freight line and have it connect into that track that we lay down. For now, we're just getting this commuter line out of the way, trying to get it positioned nicely so we can head off towards the river and into Hearn Bay in a few moments' time. And this is where we're going to bring over the passenger line, the main line, if you will. So yeah, we snap it parallel, and then we just drag it straight over, although it does transpire that I pushed it further back in an effort to try and get some speed. But what I forgot to realise is that would give us too long of a junction over the line, and Transport Fever 2 doesn't like that, as you can see. Construction not possible. So in the end, we end up pulling those bits of track back towards us a little bit, so we can get them to snap straight over, even if it means we're not going quite as fast as perhaps we were initially aiming for. So here we can see having to pull the tracks towards us a little bit just so we can get it to cross over in one go. And I think this is long enough. Yeah, it is. And if you see there, we do get a decent speed on this one. I think the slowest we end up is 81, which is pretty good. I mean, I think the other one was about 60 or 50 miles per hour. So we are encouraging this one to be the faster of the two services through all of this, which is great. So now we've crossed over. Both of our passenger lines, the main line and the commuter line, are now on the correct side where they need to be, so they can head towards Hearn Bay. So now what we want to do is start heading down there. And at the moment, I'm just pointing out where the signals eventually will be. And what we're going to do is we're going to give the passenger line priority by setting the blocks further back from the junction. In practice, what that means is your freight line is the more likely of the two to be the one that has to stop if there's oncoming traffic, and your passenger line should take priority. At this point, I'm just again making the decision to have a shorter, sharper curve, so we have a greater reduction in speed rather than having a shallower curve, but it does mean we can return to the flat track sooner than perhaps we would have done, and we can squeeze our tracks in nicely. As you can see, we're already back to full stretch here, and we have a small slowdown then at 60 miles an hour just as we approach the junction, but here on out we are now looking at top speeds, which is what we're looking for. So we just swap that to a 1% gradient there. We do need to start heading downwards slightly, but we don't want to put too much of a punishing gradient on our tracks that our trains are going to slow down unnecessarily. And it's at this point that I realised, hey, we're raised up here and we're approaching the oil line. So let's take this track back. We'll keep it at the same height, at least I think we keep it at the same height, and that encourages and promotes the construction of a bridge over our oil line just here, so we don't even have to interfere with it on our main line. We can just pass straight over with no interaction whatsoever. So at this point now, if we go straight over, look at that, we get the bridge. And I like the look of the viaduct, but 56 miles per hour is just too slow for what we need on our main line. So we do end up going for the iron bridge. But what we do is we just bring it back a little bit and extend the earthwork so the bridge isn't any longer than it really has to be. There we go, there's the iron bridge. So that gives us 112 miles per hour. And then if we just bring this second track level with it, if we can snap it in, there we go. Perfect, there we go, that's our tracks brought level, and we've crossed our oil line without having to interfere with it, so there's no slowdown for either the main line or the oil line at this point. Although we do, as I said earlier on, we do end up doing a straight crossing with our commuter line, but I'm not too concerned if the commuter line is the one that has to slow down. So just mapping out the route there, what we're going to do is we're going to head towards that hill on our left, and we're going to hug into that hillside and follow the terrain as it drops down towards Hearn Bay. Now we don't want to drop off too steeply. That was 7.5%, which is probably more than we need. So in the end, I think we opt for about 4%. Yeah, and as we can see, it's giving us that sheer cliff face on the side of our tracks. Obviously, that's something I will take care of and end up taking care of between episodes. So for now, we're just going to have to deal with that, which is quite hideous, but we can blend it out with terraforming, even if it's going to cost us a couple of million to do that. Regardless, we press onwards and we head towards that hillside as I mentioned, and now we allow the game to determine the gradient, and we can manipulate it by heading higher or lower on the slope, and we go for 2.5% gradient on this line. Again, the viaduct looks quite nice, but we can't afford that drop in speed on this line. And then we make a decision, do we want a bridge here or do we want earthworks? And in the end, we go for the earthworks, as you can see. So we continue dragging out the line along the side of the hill as we look to drop down into Hearn Bay. Going to 4.5% gradient there. Again, just admiring what would be a lovely scenic viaduct, but we just can't afford the reduction in speed, as I've said. So we go for the iron bridge there. I think we do, or do we change this to earthworks? Yep, looks like we go for the earthworks in the end anyway, so it matters not. Here's our second stretch of track being brought level now, and we're at a point where we can start turning and heading in towards the town of not Axbridge, in towards it's not Long Eaton either, is it? It's Hearn Bay. Yes, now we can head in towards Hearn Bay here and get ready for where our passenger station is going to go. Now, I was just showing you there where the residences are. They're on the eastern side of Hearn Bay. Our line is on the western side, so we shouldn't... No, swap that around. The residences are on the western side, we're on the east, that's right. So noise pollution shouldn't be too much of a problem because we have that buffer of the industry and commercial sectors. And just here is where we're going to put our station. So let's clear ourselves a little bit of room here by getting rid of these houses or industries and the roads. And let's put down our station building. And this time we're going to go for 3 tracks again, but we're going to increase the building size not to 3, but we're going to go to 2. We don't need it to be quite as imposing as we have in our capital, but we don't want it to look like a solitary, seldom used country station. We want it to have a bit of grandeur, but perhaps not as much as we have over in Long Eaton. So what we're going to do here is just flatten off a nice flat section for the station to sit on. There we go. Now we can pop in our station. Lovely. And we can connect our lines in with no trouble whatsoever, and they are relatively straight. There's a little bit of a wiggle, I think, but it's, for a guesstimate with the eyeball, it's not too bad. But as you can see, we do have a dip in the rail line. I don't know what caused that. I will end up fixing that at some point, not in this episode. I'll do it in the future because as you see in the cab ride at the end of this one, that dip is quite pronounced when you're down at ground level, and it just looks horrendous. So we're just planning out station and platform allocation at this point in time, and eventually we're going to have a pass-through station. Obviously the trains will stop, if you will, but they're not going to switch over what side of the tracks they're on. So the southbound traffic will be taking platform 2, and the northbound up towards Axbridge will be on platform 1, which means we're not going to need the crossovers. Well, we've just unlocked the A47 at this point, our electric locomotive. Anyway, now we can bring out the commuter line, and this can just head off to the where we left the previous stretch of track, just on the opposite side of this iron mine there, just to the left. So what we need to do now is get across the oil line, and this is where I make the determination that we will just have a flat crossing on this one, rather than crossing over and running parallel as we did on the West Coast freight line. We're just going to go straight over with this one. But what we are going to do is set our signals in such a way that it is the oil train that gets priority at the crossing, and the commuter service or the slow service is the one that has to wait should there be 2 trains heading to the crossing at the same point. So there we go, that's our tracks all laid in and in position. All we need to do now is chuck some signals down. I was just trying to demonstrate these floating gantry signals, and I ended up putting one in, and then sillily I actually struggled to find it to delete it. So what we end up doing is actually building a gantry here just to accommodate that floating signal. Of course, what I could have done if I'd thought about it is just zoom out so the signal icon becomes apparent and then deleted from there. But yeah, as I said, in the end we end up just putting in a gantry over these 2 train lines and making use of that signal that is just currently floating aimlessly in midair. So let's head to the asset tool selection screen, pick up the gantry, and we want a solid gantry with left stand. And if we get it positioned just right, there we go, that is no longer floating. Now for the right hand side, we don't want the reverse, what we want is the regular right stand. There we go. So they line up quite nicely, and now we can go ahead and put a signal on the right hand track as well to keep its brother company. That's a little bit short, that one. I'm not sure what that one is for. It's these G ones that we want. There we go. Let's go for I think we'll go for a 2 aspect on this one. Again, like I said, I'm not sure if I'm using them in their correct position, context, situation, whatever you want to call it. If you do happen to know what is the correct positioning and when these should be utilised, go ahead and let me know. Of course, we want them to be 2-way, so we just ensure that they are 2-way, and indeed they are. And now what we can do is just put in the rest of the signals for this journey between Long Eaton and Axbridge. It's not Axbridge, it's still Hearn Bay. You'd think this being post-production, I'd have taught myself that. In fact, I don't think I made that mistake when I was recording live. Well, I wasn't recording because I had the microphone turned off. But yeah, I'm not sure why I've got it in my head that we're going to Axbridge. I think it's because I've just recorded the next episode where we do go to Axbridge. So I think that's where the confusion stems from. Either that or I'm an idiot. Anyway, so what we do is the signals control entry to the junction. We set them quite far back for our passenger line, but for the freight line, we push them up a lot closer. Now that means it's the passenger trains will enter the junction block a lot sooner than the freight trains. So therefore, theoretically, the passenger trains will be the one that take priority, and it's going to be our freight line that has to stop to allow our passenger trains to cross over. Hopefully that will work. I do believe it does work in practice, although we don't get to see it in action in this episode. But for now we can just press on and continue chucking down the signals between here and, yes, it's Hearn Bay. So between here and Hearn Bay, and it would be a lot nicer if we could line them up. And that is a problem with the mod that allows the trains to stop a short way away from the signal. While it looks great because the driver can actually see the signal by stopping short, it does make it a little bit harder to align your signals with one another and keep them level. So let's just switch up the signal style here. We'll go for the non-gantrified 4-aspect signal here. And now we're getting close to approach into Hearn Bay. So one more signal there and then we're good. Eventually we'll put some gantries in on each of the stations, but for now just the line signals are going to do us well. We don't need any more than that. The gantry signals, while they do serve a purpose, they can control the flow of traffic in and out of a platform. They are for me more about beautification. So let's put a double slip switch in there. That allows us our train to gain access onto the freight line, onto the passenger line from the freight line. So when the trains are departing the depot, as we can see, it is quite slow for the trains that are taking the double slip switch, 43 miles per hour. But that's only for when they're first gaining access to the passenger line. If they're just crossing straight over, they maintain their high speed. So it's slow while they're first gaining access, but when they're running over here in anger, so to speak, we don't see that huge reduction that we would if we were crossing, if you follow me. So now we can think about some sort of bus circuit for Longyeat, and we need to do the same for Hearn Bay, of course. So what we do, we'll do Hearn Bay first of all. We'll just rename that to Hearn Bay. That's the train station. So what we need to do is make a bit of room for the road connection to the station in Hearn Bay. So let's just do that now. We'll just use the small road for this. It's only a small town. It might grow in future, in which case we'd probably have to redo this road. But to get the ball rolling, it's going to be more than adequate. So let's connect it in to the existing road network in Hearn Bay. Just take some of the slope off there so it's not quite so extravagant. Bring that in, and there's our nice little junction there. And what we're going to do for Hearn Bay is, well, first of all, just smooth off some of that rock face because it looks a little bit hideous and a little bit silly. So we'll just take the edge off it. We're not going to blend it all in for now, just enough that the rock has been covered up, which it has now. It looks a little bit more natural looking. And now we can think about where we want to position our bus stops. So we'll put a bus station right in front of Hearn Bay rail station with the double access points as per usual, and connect those in to our road network like so and like so. Wonderful. Now we want to put some bus stops in Hearn Bay, and what we end up opting for in Hearn Bay is just a simple circular loop that runs through all of Hearn Bay. We don't have any public transportation in Hearn Bay at the moment, so we're just going to do a simple loop all the way around. So we've got 4 stops, 1, 2, 3 and 4. There we go. So what we can do now is just make sure the buses go where we need them to, and we can also put down a bus depot, of course. So we'll pop it just there. That way, if we get the traffic lights generated at any point, we can remove them. Fortunately, it doesn't generate any at this point in time, but who knows, later on they may start appearing. So let's set up a line then. So we're going to go from Hearn Bay Exchange, 1, 2, 3 and 4, a nice simple loop. And we're going to colour this one, I think we go for green. Yes, we do. Now we need to rename it. And what we're going to call it, well, funny, well, maybe it's not funny looking back, but I originally went for Hearn Bay Loop Line, and then I was asking myself, Hearn Bay Loop Line, does that make sense? So I went for circular, or circular line. But what I ended up doing is taking the word circular and line and just combining them to make my own words up, because that's what people do, isn't it? You just make your own words up. Anyway, let's carry on. There's our two Daimlers that are running that line. Now we can head over to Long Eaton, and we can set up a system for Long Eaton as well. And we do another loop system here, but what we do is we position our bus stops for the loop system in such a way that the catchment overlaps with our existing bus stops. That way the passengers can transfer between bus stops on foot without any trouble whatsoever, and our people can get around the city fairly easily. So here we go then. So we have our one outside our station already. So if we put one, well, we have a double platform there, so let's put one just there. The catchment overlaps, so they can transfer between those three stations. They're all interchangeable. And then we'll head up this way, and we want another stop here nearby what can interchange with those two bus stations, or those two bus stops I should say. And if we put it there, the catchment does cover both. And then we want a final one as we head back towards the station, but we want to make sure we don't put it in a place where it's going to block in or delay our trucks that are heading in and out of town. So what we need now are a few waypoints. So let's go ahead and use a post box for this one. There we go. And we want to head down here, make sure our bus takes this top road. And then let's go ahead and let's use I think we end up using a giveaway sign or a yield sign if you're of American vintage, which is right at the end. There it is, the blank triangle. Give way, yep, pop it just there. That forces our bus to come along this top road, so it's staying clear of everything else. We want it to head down here. It's going to stop at that stop just there. And then we want it to come down this way. And if we just upgrade a couple of these roads here to the higher speed, higher capacity, I think we end up doing all the roads at this point actually, just to future-proof it. I can't quite remember. Nope, we only do the ones we're interested in. But yeah, it's a case of just guiding our buses around town exactly where we want them to go, with a view to avoiding them blocking in anything else. So now we can start the line here. So we're starting at Long Eaton Transfer. For the colour scheme for this one, we go for a nice dark blue, but then I realised we already have a darkish blue in here, so let's change it. I think we go for pink in the end. Yeah, there we go. So we go there, we hit our first bus stop just at Church Road, take the waypoint, take the next waypoint, then we hit the next bus stop over there at George Street, head down to the final waypoint, final bus stop on New Road, and then we're heading back into Long Eaton Transfer, and there is our loop. I think we call this one the Long Eaton Station Link, or Station Loop, I can't remember, but it's something like that. Ah, the Station Link, yes, there we go. I mean, it's more of a loop line than a link line, but what the heck, that's what we've gone for anyway. So let's get ourselves some Daimlers to run on the Station Link. We'll go for 4 of those. Colour them the wrong shade of pink, if you notice. There we go, that's the wrong shade, but never mind. Put them on the line and away they go. So at this point now we can set up our passenger main line, or what will eventually become our main line. For now we're just going from Hearn Bay to Long Eaton, of course. There's nowhere else for us to go, but it's a start. And let's go for that nice purpley blue sort of colour there. In fact, no, let's go for a deeper darker shade of purple. It looks quite nice, quite prominent, and it stands out quite nicely. And for the naming convention, we're going to go for... I originally go for RPX, thinking Rail Passenger Express, but then I remind myself, hey, This line, it's not going to be our express line, it's going to be our main line. So in the end, we settle for RPM. There we go, look, RPM, Rail Passenger Main Line, and the line name, it's very imaginative, we just call it the main line. Obviously that's open for change if anyone has any suggestions for the name of the main line, but for now that's what we're calling it. It tells it what it is. We know exactly what it's doing, it's the main line, there's there's nothing else to say about it. So now back to our depot. We of course go for the Flying Scotsman, and I deliberate here as to whether I want to give it a custom colour scheme to match the line that we're running, or do we want to keep it in its default green livery. In the end, I opt to go for keeping it default green, because when you think of the Flying Scotsman, you think of it being painted green, at least I do anyway. So in the end, we end up removing the colour, the custom paint job, keeping it green, but we do colour the passenger wagons, the Donnerbouche, I believe they are, we colour them the line colour. As we can see, they do have more capacity, 17 versus I think it's 11 for the 6-wheeler. Let's just have a look. Oh, it's 14. They do the same speed. The emissions are lower on the Donnerbouche. The loading speed is the same, and they're a little bit lighter, I believe. No, 5 ton more in weight. And they're a little bit more expensive, but it's much of a muchness, really. And we opt for the increased capacity. And I think we go for 4 carriages to start with. Yep, we go for 4. It's excellent speeds, as we can see. It's going to cost us 15 million. We just get the one train to start out with, even though we could afford several of them, because we're not going to have much passenger generation in the line's early formative years. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. We've just hopped on board the Flying Scotsman as it departs Long Eaton for the cab ride outro for this episode. Obviously, we've got to go on the Flying Scotsman, and we'll take it all the way into Hearn Bay and back, because it's quite a short distance, and our train does do a decent speed. I think we top out at 64 miles per hour. So yes, I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I apologise for the balls up with the actual recording, and the fact I had to do a post-production voiceover, which sometimes meant it was a little bit out of sync, as I had to watch it back myself and remember on the fly what I was about to talk about. So I do apologise for that. So it's only going to be this episode and the next one which are affected. After that, I'll remember to press record on the microphone. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, all that means for me to say is, as always, take very good care of yourselves. It's ta-ta for now.